Hello YouTube and welcome to this morning's episode of SHREadLines. Today we're going to be taking a look at Ontario Place. It's an old gem of Ontario that's been shut down for a couple of years now, and we wanted to take a quick little paddle over there to take a look at how it's been progressing. For those of you who haven't heard of it, Ontario Place was unveiled back on the Victoria Day weekend in 1971 to a great deal of fanfare, as it did stand as a symbol for Ontario's prosperity and untapped potential. And this futuristic playground did have a number of different features, including the first cinema sphere, which is a permanent IMAX theater that's there, as well as some pods, I guess you could call them, that were supposed to represent floating islands. And if you're familiar with Metal Gear 2 or even the sea bases in Stranded Deep, that's kind of what they remind me of at this point, but we're going to get to see those a little bit later on. As we can see from some of the footage from the Ministry of Tourism down there, we have some conceptual designs for what Ontario Place is supposed to be looking like in the years to come. They're going to be incorporating a lot of cultural elements and basically facilitating as much recreation and leisure as possible. As we make our way down the shore of Lake Ontario, we pass by the Yacht Club, and it did smell pretty delicious. I think they had some bacon and eggs going on for the brunch they had going on there at the time, and it certainly smelled a lot better than the other smells you're often going to run into on the shores of Lake Ontario, including fish and sewage in some areas. But today it really wasn't so bad. The hazards really more came from dragon boaters who made sure to make a point of telling everyone else to watch where they're going, despite traveling faster than everybody else in the wrong direction without any means of seeing behind them other than the good graces of those who are on the river. As we make our way a little bit closer to Ontario Place, we can see the desolate dome structures off there on the left, as well as our solitary Toronto wind farm. It's quite a sight to see. As you can see, nature hasn't really been all that kind to Ontario Place, as the foliage has tended to overtake a lot of these unkempt areas, and as you can see, not really a soul in sight. Although Ontario Place may not be as busy as it once was, the lakeshore is certainly as busy as ever, and there's nothing more relaxing than a morning paddle, other than a morning paddle while watching other people drive to work. On the eve of the park's opening, our Minister of Trade and Development at the time, Mr. Alan Grossman, got all philosophical on everyone when he stated that it may well turn out to be the world's most exciting island, and then went on to claim that it may help us to cease our self-analysis and just be what we are. Now, I don't know how philosophical people were back in the 1970s, but I'm not really sure that those two concepts are mutually exclusive. I mean, self-analysis might help us find out who we are, but I'm not really sure what the hell that has to do with Ontario Place. So, moving on. Here we can see the pod structures that are central to Ontario Place's architecture. This is Atlantis. As far as I understand, this is a general event center that you can rent out for whatever you want, and when I was a kid, I believe this is where they held the Lego and Nintendo Power Pods. And in the background there, we can see the cinema sphere, which at the time was described as the crowning jewel in the tiara that is Ontario Place. And I think this is a garbage chute. We were trying to figure out what it was. It doesn't look like any kind of a ladder access, but I guess you'd put a boat under there and dump trash in there. Sweet. Farther into the island's interior, we have some visitors. This is a Canadian goose with a band around its neck. I think it was protecting a nest of some kind, so I turned around and kept my distance. Here we can see some of the old restaurant structures that I think are being renovated or being used as offices at this time. The underside of some of the superstructure is looking a little worse for wear, and I'm hoping it's going to be cleaned up a little bit before this place reopens. From down here, I could really get a feel for how this place was supposed to be perceived. I can get the idea of the floating islands, the glass everywhere, the futuristic towers, but unfortunately this place kind of flopped after a few years. I think for the public, the novelty simply wore off, and there simply wasn't the demand anymore for this kind of an event center. In the park's very first season, it served a total of 2.5 million visitors, but as we fast forward about 15 years later, there were definitely calls for some change. They produced a $75,000 report in 1987, and it was never made public, and by the time it reached 1988, this park's debt had reached about $4.3 million. The late 1980s were plagued with political scandal as Patricia Starr was replaced as the chair of Ontario Place amid allegations that there was some hanky-panky going on with some charity funds. And by 1994, they started tearing up some of these venues to start making room for the Molson Amphitheater. By the time the 1990s came to an end, everybody had basically checked out. 1997 saw the discussion of plans to invest in the Ripley's Aquarium, which we have already been to, and it's awesome. And the public saw a record low of only 1.3 million visitors using their park. So I think the time for change had long since passed. Apparently, a website set up by the government to generate ideas from the public received only 35 responses and 1,200 people making submissions to the website. So I'm not really sure. What do you guys think we should do with Ontario Place? Let me know in the comments, and let's see if we can generate some interest about this place and hopefully have a place of our own to call Ontario Place 2.0. And thanks for tuning into this episode of SHreadLines.